Hello, I'm back to do another video. I'm going to cover intrusive thoughts this time. Like I said, I was in the first video, went off on a bit of a tangent, which I apologise for. So I'm going to start with a poem on intrusive thoughts because there's something I've suffered from. I was having strange ruminations throughout pretty much all of my teens, and then they sort of took on a different form around the age of around 20 and became quite chronic quite quickly. So in my book, my self-published book on Amazon, 50 Shades of Insight, one of the poems I've got in there is called Intrusive Thoughts. And basically it's every taboo subject under the sun, everything you'd never want to think that sticks like glue to your mind and repetitively goes round and round in your psychology. I just got distracted because something flashed through notification. So, right, I'm back in focus now. So this one's called Intrusive Thoughts. The harder I fight, the worse they get. Invading my mind, I feel under threat. Being attacked by inner perversion, I try and suppress, but they only worsen. I can't let them go, they're all over my brain. No matter how hard I try to be free, they're always there, attacking me. Think of a subject, anything taboo, socially unacceptable, my mind is so screwed. Insults and obscenities firing off in my brain. It's hard to keep eye contact and deal with this strain. And yes, I feel like less of a person, like I'm not good enough. I feel deeply ashamed as the symptoms worsen. Living with this is so tough. So please stop haunting and hounding me, ridiculous, childish rubbish. Just let me be so I can be free and not have to deal with this gibberish. So that was written to reflect the difficulties of living with intrusive thoughts daily. I still get them now. I'm working through them as best I can. I've done a lot over the years to be free of them and they still haven't fully shifted, but so far I've found certain things that help. Homeopathy. I'm having ongoing EFT sessions with my therapist, which are really helping me to uproot the different layers and levels of how all of this started in the first place. What else did I do? The journaling. I mentioned that in my first video. Lots of journaling that I've done over the years and I'm still doing to clear up the loose ends. It's like when I was unwell recently, I lanced the wound, you know, I got through to it finally and finally broke through to having compassion for myself and stuff like that. But there's still little sticky remnants that I need to clear. So hopefully this is the home run, the last leg of the journey, because I've waited a long bloody time to be free of this and I still believe it's possible. And the reason I believe it's possible is because I understand healing and how it works when we take a more natural approach, even though I am back on pharmaceutical meds and I accept, at least for now, for quite a while, that I'm going to need them, and I wouldn't consider reducing them again until I've been on the dose I'm on now, which is sort of the middle dose of aripiprazole, for a good 18 months, 2 years, and then I'll go very slow in reduction and very gradual if I decide to do that. But yeah, that's a slight offshoot. So back to intrusive thoughts. Okay, so how do they form and how do they get stuck? So lots of patterns in me that I've recognized, and obviously I can't speak for anyone else, but there will be certain underlying themes. So from childhood, because of abuse and different things, there were 3 separate incidents of sexual abuse by the age of 10, or at the age of 10, I think the third one was. I'm not exactly sure of the chronology. But and lots of other difficult circumstances as well. So they formed because, one, I was paranoid to the eyeballs. I still suffer with paranoia. I'm working on clearing that as well. 2, I remember after the abuse when I was 5, the first incidence of it, being exceptionally exposed afterwards. It was sort of alluded to that everybody knew what had happened to me. This is going back, God, this is 1987. Nobody knew how to deal with it. And unfortunately, it got compounded. And at a very young age, I realized just how destructive gossip can be. But it fueled all this paranoid part of myself. It's kind of like, because, and the abuse was witnessed by my brother, bless him, who's only a couple of years older than me. And what was I going to say? What was I saying? I do zone out sometimes, so bear with. This mental health malarkey isn't easy. Don't come along. So yeah, my brother witnessed it, so that added fuel to other people knowing. There was an unfortunate thing said to me afterwards by a confused little girl in school when she came up to me and said, even the kids in Ethiopia know about what happened to you. And that, I think, for a 5-year-old child, I remember that day in school, and it wasn't long after the incident itself. And I remember going back into what I now know was a freeze response. It's like it had been hit again. So it was hit for the first time during the abuse. And then the second time, I came home from school that day. And I remember staring up at the curtain pelmet, just totally blank. But some part of me trying to get my head around, how can kids the other side of the world know what happened to me? And even though I wasn't verbalizing those trains of thoughts, I was basically frozen on the spot again. It was just this massive sense of overwhelm, you know. So that for me started the roots of my fear of telepathy as well. Now, as far as I'm concerned, telepathy does exist on different levels for different people and different levels of sensitivity in different individuals. And I think maybe originally, and I'm not the only one who thinks this, but I think maybe originally a very long time back, we were all telepathic before the Great Shutdown, before the Great Shutdown, not bad term for it, before we started drowning in all the lies and all the BS. But and if you demonize something, over time we start to fear it, just like we've come to fear our own power. And most people don't even know what power is anymore, what it means to be powerful, but that's an offshoot, so I'm not going down that road. I'm doing my best to stick to the course here, so like I say, bear with. And so intrusive thoughts. So one facet of how they come about, the sort of intrusive thoughts I'm talking about, and the sort of ones I'm talking about, I remember reading a book once, even though I was never labelled with OCD, I read a fantastic book called The Imp of the Mind, which was written by a guy in America who he had a PhD, and I think it was Dr. Lee Bauer, I'm not sure how you say it, was Baer, and it was called The Imp of the Mind. And he estimated that if you got all the people together in America that were suffering from the kind of intrusive thoughts I'm talking about, you'd have the third largest state in America. And it was a massive eye-opener because a lot of people think of OCD type intrusive thoughts, and naturally they think that you're talking about the incredibly crippling thoughts. They're all incredibly crippling, and OCD is a horrible condition. But the kind of thoughts that where if you don't twist the lid on the milk 3 times, then something bad's going to happen to a family member or something. But an intrusive thought can be anything that disturbs the individual and gets stuck. And it's like a rebellion against society. It's like it is a form of paranoia of what would other people think if they knew I was having these thoughts. And I think there's very often an underlying fear of being seen by others and being watched involved as well, and being heard as well. All these sorts of things can feed into and play into how these thoughts form in the first place. And so for me personally, crippling chronic shame, or shame that became very chronic, you know, what's the definitions? The definition of guilt is to always feel like you've done something wrong, and it becomes chronic when you literally always feel that way. You know, I remember times in my early teens where like my mum would have a phone call and I think, oh God, what have I done wrong? What's going to be said? What's going to be constantly this sense of badness, of wrongness, of wrongdoing. And shame is when you feel that there is something innately wrong with you, something wrong with your body, something wrong with who you are. And shame is very often a body link, because we're conditioned to be ashamed of our bodies and ashamed of ourselves. And they're very hard emotional blocks to deal with. It's funny as well, it's like there are therapies and treatments out there that help you deal with shame and guilt, and they say that it's a necessary part of our development, because as a child you have to feel ashamed so that you don't do certain things, and guilt, you have to feel guilty so that when you feel bad you won't repeat the same mistakes. I actually would go a step further and say that there was a time, and maybe could be again one day in the future, in the far off future probably, where we don't need guilt and shame at all anymore. And I'll explain a little more what I mean, but it's because for me they create blocks. I don't see them as particularly natural emotions. I can see what people are saying about them serving a purpose there. And with current living, the way we are all living, yes, we do need to deal with it, not run with it, work through it. And yes, it is serving a purpose. But as I said, I'm kind of thinking ahead and thinking to a time where kind of we go back to go forward, because I think that once we are deconditioned from this idea of, and this will have to go generation to generation into the future, but the way to do that is to go back through the generations and to clear ancestral blockages of things that weren't felt. I'm going on offshoots again. Let me stick to the course. So yeah, so I think that in relation to shame and guilt, shame first. We don't need to be ashamed of our bodies. There isn't anything innately wrong with us. And even though we're living in a world where we're constantly bombarded with these ideas that there are, and yes, people are born with disabilities, yes, people are born with deformities, stuff like that, but that has connotations elsewhere as well. That has connotations with things that are passed down through the lineage. You know, it could be as simple as something, a tablet that was going in your mother's body or your father's body when you were conceived, or more layers and levels to that. Obviously it's not cut and dried, and the healing journey is unique to everyone. But anyway, I'm still veering off the beaten track here. I do it all the bloody time. It's because there's a lot in there that I want to bring out. So I'll go back. And guilt, do we need guilt? Do we need it so that we don't do bad, hurtful things? At the moment, yes, but at some point in the future, it's not a necessity as far as the more we love who we are, the kinder we are to ourselves, the more we heal and integrate, the wholer we become. There is then no inclination or any reason for us to hurt someone else. And I don't even mean, when I talk about hurting someone else, I don't even mean actively, maliciously hurting. I'm not on about that. I mean, the more people who heal, the less will be offended, the less will be triggered, the less... Do you see what I mean? As we work through it individually and collectively, layer by piece, as we bring more natural ways of healing in, they can then take over from ways that aren't so natural, like allopathic medicine, which again doesn't treat health as holistic. I'm very much the natural approach me. It's not that I don't see the benefit of allopathic, if I'm saying that right, medicine in the current standing of the way things are. Yes, it does have benefit. And without those meds, I would be very, very unwell again. You know, I spent those 2 months on the psychiatric ward recently, and I was very unwell again. It's funny with these YouTube videos, it's kind of like there's going to be such an overlap because I don't really know how to format them. But if you are interested in what I'm saying and you subscribe and go on my channel, you'll find anything I upload there and you'll be able to watch them all. So my intrusive thoughts formed, one, because of shame and guilt that had formed within me that wasn't dealt with. Two, there was a massive fear of loss of control, that formed more deeply over time. For me, I think it's a lot to do with the abuse when I was 5 is one of the reasons, because when my brother walked in and saw what happened, my body was responding with intense pleasure, as any child who's stimulated in that way, it would do, provided there's nothing physical to block that from happening. But my brother walked in at the point after he'd been stimulating me for a while, and not my brother, the guy who did it to me. My brother was only 7, I was only 5, just to clarify that, because I don't want any blurred lines on that. Yeah, I think I was, in retrospect, looking back, I would have been close to orgasm. So that fear of letting go when he just stopped, when my brother walked in, because the guy doing it had been caught, it just... that energy had nowhere to go but live inside me. And I watched the adults around me, not only him, but my own parents, lots of other people. They were all in varying degrees out of control insofar as, you know, they hadn't dealt with their own stuff, and so it was being passed on. Nobody did deal with this. Nobody knew what a healing journey was in 1987. If they did, then they were well ahead of the game, you know. And even now, some people don't know the term. A lot of people don't. But it's, yeah, that fear of loss of control, that mistrust in my own body, that mistrust in adults, the paranoia, it had all begun to form from there. all of it. And yeah, I think I grew up, I can remember lots of incidents where I felt ashamed of my periods, my bodily processes. That's been a big one for me. And apparently those sorts of themes are very common with people who've been sexually abused as children. And like I say, that is shame. Shame is feeling there is something innately wrong with who you are, but that who you are is very often a sense of it links in with physicality and sexuality in one way or another. So very often the genitals, the bodily processes, it could be down to the way you look, it could be any number of things. And yeah, shame seems to very much be a body related thing, or a mistake you've made, but normally there'll be an element of the body involved in that. What else can I think of in relation to intrusive thoughts, how they form and how they stick? So definitely paranoia, definitely shame and guilt, fear as well, because the anxiety mindset. I mean, I was shaking from the age of 11 onwards. I pretty much overcame my nerves unless it was in relation to public speaking. That is the one time when they would come back quite severely, and that just shows trapped energy in the body as well, that my nervous system isn't flowing freely, that there are little blocks and stuckness there. So, and in terms of the difference, I suppose, between blocks and stuck energy, it's like when something is badly blocked, like it was for me for years on my solar plexus area, because that area gets damaged when kids are abused sexually in that way, because it collapses your core, it wounds your power center and it collapses your core. Now it's in the diaphragm area and in the area of the solar plexus chakra, and that is your power center, that's your confidence, that's your will, it's all of those things, and your sense of self and of boundaries. It all gets blown apart in a wanna. And people don't realise, I was chatting to my therapist the other day and just discussing the fact, we were talking about, people don't realise the impact of that level of trauma and just how far reaching it is. You know, when people have trauma to the body of any kind, no, it can go, and it depends, obviously everyone's circumstances are unique as to what type of trauma, when it happened, how, all the circumstances and nuances will be unique to whatever the individual went through. But it has far-reaching consequences, bloody far-reaching. Boundaries can be blown apart on so many levels, you know, and when you take a wound like that to your body or your sexuality, obviously your genitals are part of your part of your body, what was I going to say? It really does have a knock-on effect. So wherever the body is traumatized, that trauma remains if that freeze response is activated. And this is where blocks begin to happen and where energy gets stuck. And then if you look at it on the auric level, then the spiritual level, and it's all interlinked. Apparently you get like tears and holes in the aura. This is where you go down the spiritual route then, of where different things, entities and stuff and other people's energies can get in. So the healing journey is all about piecing yourself together on all levels again in order to return to a state of homeostasis. But I always wonder if I'm saying that right. I think I did at that point though. Homeostasis. No, it is homeostasis. Pretty sure it is. So I think I finally managed to get it right. But I don't know whether, I think I might leave this video here because I'm kind of like not honing in on the individual topics so much, of going a bit broad. And I did speak to my mum today as well. We were talking about what I said in the second video I uploaded, was that that I didn't mind these videos being a bit higgledy-piggledy, because it's kind of it's showing that mental illness leaves us that way. It leaves us fragmented, it leaves us sort of disjointed and all over the shop. And don't get me wrong, I'm like I said, I'm on the home run, so I've done a lot of healing already, and there's not much left for me to clear now, which is fantastic. I'm doing a hand job. I always talk with my hands. There's not much left for me to clear, so I'm clearing it with my hand. But so yeah, and I spoke to Mum about it, and I said, yeah, ideally further down the line I would love to make videos that are more coherent and straight to the point. But right now, if I'm representing severe mental impairment and what it can do, and I'm high functioning when I'm medicated, but that hasn't just happened. That's years worth of, you know, working on myself. And so And my tremor came back as well when I was on the ward recently, and you can probably see me shaking a bit there if it just, yeah, I don't know, but, and so I'm working on that too, but I'm back on my remedy, my homeopathic remedy. I'm back having my therapy sessions, my EFT, or will be very soon. I got one appointment booked. And fingers crossed, it shouldn't be too much longer. I will break through this. And the funny thing is, I've always known, right from when it got really bad when I was 20, I knew instinctively this is going to heal one day. What I didn't know is how many years and how much blood, sweat, toil and tears it would take. I really have suffered. I'm not saying that because I want bloody sympathy of anyone. I find sympathy quite patronising anyway, but empathy is a beautiful thing. But I think that, I say it because it's true. It's true. I've suffered a lot extensively. And you know, if I'm going to be raw and vulnerable, I'm going to tell you what my head just said there and how there's still residue of guilt in me for mistakes I made. I had an intrusive thought then saying, yeah, you've caused a lot of suffering too. That's what I mean about the kind of intrusive thoughts and stuff, and how when the guilt isn't fully clear or the shame isn't fully clear, and yes, I have made a lot of mistakes, and I would happily apologise to anyone who I've upset. In fact, I'll do that now, because that's the thing with trauma. When they say hurt people, yes, they do, but I am not malicious. There was not intent in the things I did. It always involved alcohol. Most of it was in my youth, and I did come across as, well, weird, I suppose, for want of a better word, but everything has its roots in something. And I suppose when we label something as weird, what we're really saying is, I don't understand where this person is coming from. And the reality is, I didn't understand either. That's what trauma does as well. It alienates us from ourselves first and foremost, before it even begins to alienate us from other people. And it really does. It's kind of like, I was saying these strange things when I was drunk. I was having these strange thoughts. I didn't know why I couldn't dismiss them. I didn't know where they were coming from. I didn't get it at that point. I was very young, and everything I'd been through had just blended into one, you know. And if doors haven't been closed on things, of course they're going to leak into the next phase of life. If you don't have those rites of passage, which we've lost touch with in modern living, they're important. They are important. And without them, we don't close the door on one section and then open for another. I mean, the sorts of things I talk about on here, we're getting to the stage now where we're remembering how to deal with these things more effectively, but that information still needs to get out there. And the awareness, the resurgence in the awareness in things like how do you deal with trauma? How do you piece yourself back together? All these things are gradually coming back to the fore, and I just want to play my part, that's all, because I want to make it count. You know, I've been through a lot and I want to make it count. Firstly, to validate myself and my own experience, but secondly, to help others as much as I can as well. And no, it isn't about because of any residual guilt. It's because that I'm working on clearing anyway, and it's almost gone, and the shame is still lingering in places, but that will be gone soon too. I've wrote my affirmation statement for my next EFT session earlier, because for anyone who doesn't know, that's part of how EFT works. You write a statement that starts with like, even though blah blah blah, whatever you want to put in that's phrased slightly negatively, and then you turn it around, and at the end you end with something like, I deeply and completely love, accept and forgive myself, or whatever suits to the individual for that session. And while you're doing it, you're stimulating these pressure points. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to talk you through the process of EFT. It's an easy enough thing to look up, to do on yourself for one thing. But if your issues are more deep rooted, and you feel like EFT might work for you because you've got stuck emotions and stuck thoughts that haven't processed, I definitely recommend finding a good therapist and getting some done. There's lots of other techniques as well with your EMDR. I love my homeopathy as well. And earlier tonight I went to a talk on herbalism, a Welsh herbalist lady, and it was fascinating. It really got me thinking, actually. So I was going to say one other thing. Something sprang into my head before I close this video out. What was it? What I was going to say was, for me as a child, there was no one to turn to. There was no one who had my back insofar as it was up to me, it was me against the world. That pattern very much carried over into adulthood, and I sort of had to fight my way through being seen, being heard, making sense of myself first and foremost, then of the world, and then of, you know, people misunderstanding what I was trying to say in certain instances as well. And it took a long time to get to this point, a long time. And I didn't have anyone to turn to as such as a kid. This is getting better now in terms of support. More and more people, because we're at such crisis point with mental health, our compassion is reigniting. Slowly but surely it's reigniting. And this is a good thing. And when I say slowly but surely, I think the potential in the age of Aquarius, ruled by Uranus, I'm starting to throw the astrology in now because I love my astrology, and there's a lot But Uranus rules Aquarius. Aquarius rules technology. And Uranus is the catalyst for change, the great awakener in astrology. And that means that things can speed up very quickly, as we're already seeing with the technological era. I mean, God, 20 years ago, 25 maybe, nobody had a mobile phone, you know, this is when it was all starting, and we look how quickly things have moved on. And yes, there are a lot of flaws in technology at the moment because it's in its infancy and it's all hit us all very quickly, very hard, very fast. But there's a lot of potential, and the potential for that change can be sped up. I remember reading in a book that I'll talk about because it had a massive impact on me, both detrimental and eventually positive as I learned to work more with my own wounds. But all I'll say is in it, it said about, it described the Aquarian age as the frenetic, peripatetic, kinetic Aquarian age, and that speaks of the movement and the motion and the speed at which everything can potentially change. And there's a lot of potential good in technology. Think how far-reaching, how quickly a message can get out there, and a lot of messages are beginning to come back out there that need to be heard, that need to be seen. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover, and some. What am I on now? 26 minutes, coming up to 27 minutes. So until we meet again, au revoir, see you in the next video. Thank you. Oh, like, share, subscribe if you like my content, and thank you for taking the time, if you have, to stay with me this long. Thank you. Bye.